Now I would like to introduce you to the 2019 keynote speaker. If you have read Chris's bio in the programs on the table, you probably didn't need to read past the first line to know that we are in for an extraordinary treat tonight and a wonderful way to send this extraordinary group of students off into the vast world of experience design. So whether for Mick Jagger, the Pope, major humanitarian efforts worldwide, Chris has designed about a gazillion impactful experiences all around the world. We are thrilled to have you meet Chris tonight and learn about how he brings joy, surprise, and unity to our public spaces and experiences. So please welcome Chris Wangro to the stage for the 2019 keynote address.
For those of you who know me, you know that I never give speeches. So I don't. Gonna give you you gotta just bear with me a minute to get this thing set up. Okay. Turn on this thing here. Take out the prop for later. All right. So thank you for having me here. I don't give speeches. It's remarkable to try and do this. Note the tripod. I'm going to speak today about spectacle, joyful noise, and the general transformation of the everyday. But I want to make a quick disclaimer, which I only realized I had to do as I was walking over here. I'm going to talk about the positive parts of spectacle, as I see them. But we live in an age full of spectacle that is pretty darn evil. Spectacle has a good side and power, and the inverse side. So as I talk about the good stuff, which I'm going to do, just remember, there's a dark side. Okay. All right, let me see if this works. Ooh. Oh, hey, there we go, sorry. So I spent a lifetime creating events, as it was introduced. Mostly public events, mostly large scale, mostly in public places. My first love was the circus. I was a ringmaster, I was a clown, I was a magician. And from that I went on to, I was the director of special events in New York City's Parks Department. And from there I went on to produce everything from UN summits and papal visits to concerts with Snoop Dogg and Johnny Cash. Not together. The pictures behind me are going to tell you some of the story, and some of you know that story already. I don't do this anymore, thankfully. It was great, but I think it's a younger person's game, and I have moved on from this to be a collaborator on the development of public space. And what that means for me is I help design parks and plazas and waterfronts, and I build design strategies for bringing people together in those spaces that we design. Everyone with me so far? Great. No, we'll hold that for later. When I'm asked about the through line for all this stuff, it's like it's a hodgepodge of things. It's a strange path. So it's disjointed. The way I generally describe it is to say, I grew up creating happenings for spaces, and now I focus on the spaces themselves. That's simple. But the other through line for me is I think I've focused on projects and programs and events that transform people's experience of the place and of each other, of the crowd that they're with. And because I am who I am, because I'm a silly guy, I'm an old clown, I like to do it in a joyful manner. For me, joy is a tool that can break down our defenses, it can break down our boundaries, and it can transform individuals and culture. How, you might ask? Let's see. The video I'm going to show first, and it's the only video, so you can soak it in or get a drink. you could get a drink anyway. The video is of the first, of the last event that I produced. I was working as a road producer, and it was the first major American show in Cuba for over 50 years. It was winter of 2016, just a few years ago. A very different political climate, and I did it with a small and very devoted cadre of relatively nutty Cubans who had wanted to put together a music festival and asked me to help them. That festival was not allowed to happen, not from pressure from the American side, but from the Cuban side. But somehow we managed to pull this off. And for those of you who have seen this video, watch it again, love it again. And well, we're going to talk about something different, so you're going to look at it in a slightly different light. So hey, the first thing that makes everyone go wow is just the scale of the thing, right? The scale is remarkable, but the scale is not really the spectacle. It's more than that. The spectacle is more than that, I should say. The meat on the bones of the spectacle, the substance of the spectacle, what reaches me on a deeper level, is the content of the spectacle, which is not the band on stage. It's what's happening in the crowd. It's that joy. It's that spirit. It's the unmitigated passion that several 100,000 people participate in. The joy is what creates a transformation of space. It's the joy that creates a transformation of those hopped up individuals into one united community. Cuban estimates of crowd attendance were 450,000. I don't think there were 450,000 people there, but whatever the number was, there were no crimes, there was no incidents, there was no robbery, no fights. And believe me, there were plenty of people who were plastered. Everyone gets along in a situation like that. And I think it's because the joy, that spirit of joy, brings everyone together and creates a kind of unity. And that spirit of joy carries the day. Whatever the number was, the people there own the space. They own that space, and in fact, in this case, in Cuba, it was really important, they own their own lives. And they own their own lives not as individuals, but as that mass of people bonded together. And that bond was indelible. Everyone said it was a little bit like when the Berlin Wall came down, which I think is a bit of an overstatement, but the wall that came down was the wall between them. And they were bonded by that spectacle together. And it was an unforgettable moment. Catching my breath. The only other thing I want to say about Cuba before I stop is that was the first and the last event of its kind. That the Cuban government, the Cuban hardliners in particular, came down immediately after and said no more. That they were not ready to have this kind of American product on their soil. But I think what they were really afraid of was the power of the spectacle and the bond it created for the youth of Cuba. Here's the way I put it down on paper, which is better than the way I just said it. I think that what the Cuban government was afraid of, what they saw, was the power of a gathering to challenge the status quo. And I think the important thing to remember is a joyful spectacle can be a threat to the status quo. Okay, change. Chapter 2, the Yippies and the Politics of Joy. If anyone here is old enough to know the Yippies, forgive me, I'm going to do a quick introduction. My favorite, perhaps, all-time crazy spectacle-making cultural crusaders were a bunch of the Yippies. For those who haven't heard of them, the Yippies were kind of an iconic and wacky group of 60s activists who understood the power of participatory spectacle, and they used it as a tool for change. Yippies saw protest as theater. They saw activism as spectacle. And it was not, well, as a part of a counterculture that was certainly Bacchanalian, it was not their way to organize around negativity. They were a joyful and crazy bunch. They staged absurdist experiences that were designed to strengthen the ties of their community and create sensational stories so wild that even the media, that was at that time incredibly conservative, couldn't resist them. But it was deeper than that. There was more to it. They were rebels with a cause. I have a quote here on my screen from Jerry Rubin, known Yippie leader, one of the founders. Here's Jerry. He says, activism goes beyond fulfilling the self. It's about cultivating our ties to each other and the world around us. We aim to open up alternative spaces, mental and physical spaces, in order to remind us of the possibilities for a better and a more joyful world. Okay, everyone still with me? Good. A good example of how they put this into practice, and a timely one, was their campaign at the 1968 Chicago Democratic National Convention. It's 68. I know you guys were all there, but 68 political assassinations. Think civil rights, think Vietnam, think sex and drugs and rock and roll. The country was in total upheaval. It was a mess. The Democratic Convention was being held in Chicago, and the Democrats at that time had refused to make a stand against Vietnam. The Yippies, counter to that, announced that they would create their own counter-convention. They announced it, and they said it would be called the Festival of Life. And the plan, their plan, which was quite strategic, was to create a story of what would happen at the Festival of Life, and it would be so outrageous and so compelling that the media would then tell the story and communicate it to the world. So the first move that the Yippies made was to use the conventional media to create the experience that they wanted to have happen, right? And that kind of worked, because then the word was that they would get tens of thousands of people to Chicago, which created a bit of a problem. Whoops, I think I went too far. No, can I go back? I'm sorry. No, I kind of blew it, but that's really good. Okay. I'm going to go back. The first slide, I just want to show these. All right. Forgive me, I'm new to this game. All right. All right. I think I got it going. Forgive me. At direct shows, I don't do this, right? So the first slide I'm showing is just to give you a sense of the backdrop, and what the place was like. With thousands of protesters expected, 12,000 cops were deployed onto the streets. I don't even know where you get 12,000 cops. But that wasn't enough because it sent in the National Guard. So they had full platoons of combat-ready guys to meet the Festival of Life. And it was serious business. That was the same year King was killed. There were riots across the country. Cities were burning. It was serious business. It was that backdrop. It was this, where the Yippies staged the Festival of Life, and it was against this backdrop that they held a now legendary press conference where they announced that they too would run a candidate for president. That candidate was a pig, an actual pig named Pegasus. So this might look silly, right, this whole thing about pig. I mean, we got a pig in office now, but cheap shot. So again, this was really strategic and really smart. The spectacle, he says, of Pegasus served as a centerpiece for the Festival of Life. Right? It created a tone for the piece. gave the center. It gave the counterculture something to rally against. It strengthened the bond of the counterculture that was there, facing off against the National Guard, and it diminished the opponents by making them look absurd, because it was absurd. And of course, it gave the media irresistible fodder. The joyful noise that these guys created was really about exercising their First Amendment right. They created a situation that would make people smile and laugh, not just be angry. And at the same time, they pushed the local authorities to their limits. And their strategy, of course, worked. The Chicago mayor, an utter brute, I won't call names, he couldn't handle it. The police were sent in. Ultimately, the National Guard were sent in. And they were all arrested. Well, a lot of the Gibby leadership was arrested. They became part of the Chicago 7. And the pig, or Pegasus, was also arrested. Never to be seen again, and legendarily eaten at a cop's barbecue roast. Don't know if it's true, but it's in the literature, folks. So okay, enough of this. But I just want to say, so this crazy spectacle has been, it looks like it's really silly, but it was hailed as one of the great pivotal moments of the war movement, or the anti-war movement, and a key learning of the 60s sort of, I don't even know what to call it. But it was a moment that united the country. It united the country first in humor, and then in anger, and ultimately helped raise the country's resolve against the war. Okay. Enough of the heavy stuff. It's water. Another thing that's really unusual for me. All right, so Cuba and Chicago sort of prove the power of participatory experience. But I want to play out an example that specifically targets the physical transformation of space, and I want to do it right here with you tonight. One example I like a lot was called the tangle. The tangle was developed in New Zealand, and I love it because it's so damn simple. It's also lovely because it's completely intergenerational and cross-cultural, and it's a very simple idea that brings people together and it's unifying. What you do is you hand people lots and lots of rolls of very brightly colored flagging tape, just like I have here. Yeah, that's true, see? Yeah, I'm in trouble all over. Help anybody, come on, man. So you hand people, yeah, here you go. Oh, good, here, take a few more here. And the basic idea is you take a bunch of this stuff and you tangle it around, often there's a structure. You sort of like, you start with it here, hold this. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good, help me out. So you just sort of start with the structure, and you you tie it onto something, and then you tie it, you wrap it around something else, like this guy over here, and then you tie it around a chair. What happens is you get people begin to participate. So what happens is these out there. So there's this. Yeah, this is good. So what's happening? It's nice. I like that. Thank you very much. And people begin to tangle away. Everyone tangle. Be entangled. So the beauty part here, this is happening. This is great. You see, in theory and in practice, this is not only transforming the space, but it's transforming you, the individuals who are participating, and you're no longer individuals because you're busy becoming part of a community that is creating together.
Chris Wendell.
Yeah, see how that works? You're no longer individuals because you're creating together, so now you're instantly a community doing this thing. And it's fun! It's joyful! Excellent. Okay, so we have seen, I'll create a monster here. We have seen how creating joy and participatory experience and community can in fact be joyful and silly. But we have seen how this can also be a very valuable doing such amazing work, not just tangling, and there's such incredible creativity in the room, and the projects are so damn good, and you guys deserve to celebrate. I mean, right? We're so fortunate to be here. I want to do one more thing for you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Going back to my circus days, ladies and gentlemen, creators and makers, visionaries all, it is with great pleasure that I introduce you the mighty transformers of space, the manufacturers of joy, the Hungry March Band! is on. That is our joyful noise for the night. Go out and make joyful noise. Go out and make spectacle. Go out and make positive change. Thank you so much for putting up with me. Have a good night.